We're finally going to be able to see World of Warcraft's actual sub numbers and how much damage did Shadowlands actually do to the game.
I'm going to be presenting information that details World of Warcraft subscriber trends. This is real data from a Blizzard presentation that took place at GDC this year. In fact, it took place like a day or two ago. Now, in doing a story like this, talking about a thing that's kind of leaked out, it's got to be genuinely newsworthy, it's got to serve a public interest, and given that we are talking about World of Warcraft sub numbers, I think for the audience here, that is completely obvious. Now this...
Definitely. Almost everyone thinks that Shadowlands did irreversible damage to World of Warcraft, and I think so too. So I want to see how actually bad it is.
Will be going public eventually. GDC talks always end up being available after the fact in the GDC vault, though often at a decent bit of a delay. Now, me saying this does make it all sound very serious, and in a way it is serious. We are dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, but mostly...
Don't care. I'm a player first for this.
This is fascinating. This charts World of Warcraft's success, its downward trend. It even confirms its lowest point in...
Dragonflight. Remember Dragonflight? When dragons, the noble, not caring about the problems of mortals, creatures who are above everything, just allowed you to ride them like dumbass pets? Good times. Good times.
Modern history. Do you want to know when WoW was at its worst? You're going to find that out today. And we even have an internal breakdown of why the Shadowlands expansion failed.
Ooh.
And by the end of this analysis, you will have the most accurate possible subscription number that can be done right now. And a subscription number for right.
It probably failed because this guy couldn't even get an armor that's actually, you know, not cracked and, you know, protect whatever his core or whatever this is supposed to be. I think that's why it failed, because this guy's an idiot.
Right now, we will also know WoW sub numbers for its worst periods of health, and we'll be able to compare our workings out to Blizzard and Activision Blizzard's prior statements. I cannot wait to get into this, and if this kind of thing is tickling your brain, getting it whirring, I think you'll love today's sponsor.
Boot.dev, their mission is to teach you back-end web development, which is an amazing skill, and in this case, 30-day money-back guarantee, where they've got free demos of all of their courses. So, cheers Boot, and let's roll. First, we've got a graph of subscribers. This is something we've not got in a decade. Blizzard stopped reporting them during Warlords of Draenor because, yeah, the sub numbers went down pretty damn big. And
this is already deceptive. Well, not already deceptive. This is 100% deceptive, because look at this. World of Warcraft, and this is Legion. Yeah, they're not showing whatever number this is. I'm assuming subscribers or player count. And they're not showing the start. Remember, when World of Warcraft started, it was here, okay? Legion by itself is roughly here. So, yeah, this is a pretty deceitful graph, honestly.
Anyway, you see the numbers be pretty good for the launch of Legion. We see Legion lose players, then flatten out. BFA bumps us up, but not by as much as I thought, to be honest. But immediately after BFA, we do...
Wow, the drop of Shadowlands is kind of insane.
...see awful, awful months. And what we're actually looking at here is a rolling average of World of Warcraft subscribers. It does not get any more real than that. Now, at the time of Classic's launch, we heard that it just about doubled WoW subs, and this graph absolutely does back that up. Classic then was clearly helping as we were moving into Shadowlands, of course, given the pandemic.
Wait, what do you mean doubled its subs? This graph does not show anything like that. What do you mean? Now, we're missing some information about this graph, but, you know, if this is Battle for Azeroth and this is Classic, yeah, this is not doubling its subs now, is it? Considering this line does not start at 0, most likely, right? This is only doubling its subs if this line starts at 0. And do we see it starting at 0? I don't think we do. I do not think we do see it start at 0. So this is the lowest peak. This graph does not this is in no way evidence of it doubling. Because this is not 0 players. If this was 0 players, then yeah, you could say that Classic doubled it, but it doesn't look like it. So I don't know what that's supposed to be, but it's not doubling at all, just by looking at this graph.
In the pandemic, it just did incredibly well, but that was followed by crippling failure. And when we at the time of Classic's launch, we heard that it just about doubled WoW subs, and this graph absolutely does back that up. Classic then was clearly helping as we were moving into Shadowlands, of course, given the pandemic, it just did incredibly well, but that was followed by crippling failure. And when we zoom in, we see the unbroken line is the actual subs, the dashed line is the expected subs. You can see Shadowlands dropped like a rock, and unlike Legion and BFA, Classic existed during those initial quarters of Shadowlands. And looking at this, you may think that TBC and Wrath Classic didn't help much. Remember, TBC, Wrath Classic, and regular World of Warcraft all show the same subscription. So even if TBC was doing pretty decently, that could very much be cancelled out by the performance of Shadowlands. And of course, it's very much not a surprise when we see this labeled as historically high churn. Yeah, we all knew that. The difference here is we're hearing it from Blizzard directly. Now, next, here's another slide for us to look at, and this one gets really interesting. This is a breakdown.
I don't actually understand how they can cancel each other out. Doesn't this all go together? Again, what is this magical graph of if it's not some kind of player activity, subscriptions, player count, daily logins, or whatever? I'm not believing anything he's currently saying, honestly.
Of why Shadowlands didn't work in their estimation. They say afterlife setting wasn't accessible, new antagonist wasn't developed, well-known story heroes were diminished. I mean, does that match how Shadowlands felt?
Oh, no, not at all. What is this? So this is this is bad. This is what do you mean? What is this? Is this supposed to be the reasons why they failed? Afterlife setting wasn't accessible. What do you mean? There wasn't enough hand-holding to tell you where to go? That's a lie. This is completely false. New antagonist wasn't developed. No, the new antagonist was fucking shit and stupid. You rewrote literally all of World of Warcraft's history to say that the god of death was behind everything that happened in the universe. Arguably, you could say that the antagonist was very developed. It was just poorly written, beyond poorly written. Well-known story heroes were diminished. Yeah, they killed my girl Sylvanas, okay? Sylvanas was my favorite character, and they just absolutely butchered her. Yeah, that's pretty accurate, though.
Heroes were diminished. I mean, does that match how Shadowlands felt to you? Certainly does for me. And this, remember, straight from the horse's mouth, is the closest that we will see to Blizzard just saying straight up, this whole thing was a mistake, we shouldn't have done it, we ruined our iconic heroes, the villain sucked. As for gameplay, they say it lacked variety, borrowed power was wearing thin, systems were not evolving, and that I get, they were just iterating the same thing again and again and again. And when we think about variety, I mean, hey, 16 months in the Sanguine Depths, does that sound good to you? Vitally, they call out community specifically, saying gaps in content, lack of transparency, didn't feel heard. I mean, it's all shit that we said, right? But this is great. And look, from what I could glean...
When do World of Warcraft players feel heard, by the way? I'm not sure. Never, I'm gonna assume.
A lot of Team 2 members were not happy at this period of time. There's a phrase I could say referring to some cliques, but I will not say it because it would be revealing and that would be irresponsible. But that kind of thing was going on. And another side is there has actually been quite a lot of staff turnover since the Shadowlands. Anyway, TLDR, it was a little bit of a shit show, and I think that absolutely did show in their public communications. The question then for us is, does the contents of this slideshow feel like it's been internalized by the team? I mean, literally, in some ways. Game-wise, I very much think so. The state of core class design is better than it's been in years. Mythic Plus is at an all-time peak. I've got a report coming out on that next week. By the raw numbers, it is literally the best it has been through all of this current WoW expansion. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to some numbers. So we're taking a look at the launch of Dragonflight, and that must have been a terrifying thing for them. Its launch did not bring them back to their earlier Shadowlands numbers. That is dire, and it reflects an abnormally weak marketing campaign, one of their worst expansion cinematics, and an expansion that felt almost unexciting by design, which I kind of understand. How can you have a massive villain arc right after you've tried to pull the jailer? Right after you've wheeled out developers to claim in marketing materials that the jailer's demise is in fact the closing of a book that began in Warcraft 3. That was completely insane. And feature-wise, it didn't have any insane hyper-marketing feature like artifact weapons. And there was even mismatch with audience expectations with the
Well, they did give a new class, which is always pretty hype, honestly. I don't know, when the Dragonflight cinematic dropped, it was kind of boring. Okay, the dragons are going back to their island. Yay! But why do I care? Why do I care the dragons are going back to their stupid island? I don't know. Should I? Probably not.
race. The Drakthir were a take and playable dragonkin that were nothing like what Warcraft as a franchise had led people to desire or expect. But for all of that, and indeed because of some of that, it did focus on the essentials: class design, talents, public events, basic traversal, content cadence.
The talents and traversal were obviously the big, huge wins of Dragonflight.
Let's see then what investing in those core foundational things actually gets you in your game. Looking at the Dragonflight sub-numbers, we see that initially, pretty mid, actually. The initial content seemed to do okay. Not amazing. It clearly did have a lower churn rate than what we would have expected. But where things get wild is mid-2023 and beyond. So what happened? Well, classic hardcore, both unofficial and official.
Okay, also looking at this graph, considering everything is shown here, my question is pretty simple. So, does this... So, I'm assuming this is just subscription numbers. So, you're telling me all of this hardcore, Dragonflight, Season of Discovery, Cataclysm, Classic, and whatnot, this is the expectancy, right? You're telling me all of these things to put together after Shadowlands didn't bump it up even that much? That's actually quite impressive damage that Shadowlands did, honestly, there in that case.
Wild is mid-2023 and beyond. So what happened? Well, classic hardcore, both unofficial and official, kicked off. There was a revamp of gearing in modern WoW, and that I cannot overstate the importance of, because for so many people, gear literally makes them go and play the game. So yeah, fix up gearing, people start playing more. Surprising.
Yeah.
BlizzCon then was huge. It got the vibes right, and instead of a woohoo, happy trailer, we got something with meat, with emotional depth, with compelling vocal performances, amazing animation, industry leading, and of course, Season of Discovery, which was launched quite shortly after. You would be forgiven for assuming that this spike is all Season of Discovery, but some numbers suggest that's not all the case. As an example, we've just published our report of Mythic Plus activity to our members and our analysis of Night Stalker's numbers. That'll be up on the channel next week. The core thing, though, is that Season 3 of Dragonflight, in terms of the number of...
Okay, I'm gonna question this part right here because, so, Mythic Plus, you need to consider something. People were complaining about Mythic Plus being too hard, too restrictive, and so on and so on and so on, for a very long time. So, Mythic Plus getting more people in it might just be actually in-game changes that makes more classes viable for Mythic Plus, that makes Mythic Plus itself easier, and so more people try it and whatnot. The fear of failure is the biggest deterrent for a lot of people. So if they just make Mythic Plus more accessible, that will just naturally push up the number of people who actually do Mythic Plus. So this is not necessarily more people are playing the game. This might just be, oh, they made Mythic Plus more accessible, and we can figure this out pretty easily. I don't play the retail, but a lot of you probably do. In the past couple of months, have they made Mythic Plus better? Have they made it more accessible? Have they balanced it out? Is it more accessible to more classes and whatnot? Because if it is, this completely counterbalances the idea, or completely kind of erases the concept and idea that more people are just playing retail now. And Dragonflight has been going on for quite a long time, and people typically don't just magically start playing, you know, an expansion at the end of its life cycle, especially if you know that there's going to be another expansion afterwards.
Will be up on the channel next week. The core thing, though, is that Season 3 of Dragonflight, in terms of the number of runs done, is demolishing Season 1 and demolishing Season 2. And when we looked into raid statistics, we've been seeing retention numbers that are essentially unparalleled in recent history. Pretty interesting. This slide then draws us a few points of comparison. Right now, World of Warcraft has as many subs as it did partway through the classic spike back in the days of BFA. It's just shy of Shadowlands' flash in the pan, and
in the classic days of Battle for Azeroth. Damn, boy. We fucking old.
Actually looks as strong as Legion. Does it feel like that, though? Does the community feel like that? The answer is no, and there are many reasons, but a big one is Fragmentation Classic.
Wait, what are these blue and green points? Equilation point from Legion launch. Okay, equivalent point from BFA. What the fuck is this? Equivalent point from BFA launch. Equivalent point from Legion launch.
Big one
I don't get it.
is Fragmentation Classic. Season of Discovery and Modern have all got different player bases. We literally don't see each other. We don't watch the same YouTubers and watch the same Twitch people, right? So together we're producing Legion-like subscription numbers, but it doesn't feel like that because we're actually logging into different versions of World of Warcraft. And that, I think, is an important factor. Modern World of Warcraft is, I think, very much on an upswing. But modern WoW is still short of Legion, because Legion...
It's probably true, though, because Dragonflight wasn't bad, but the expansion after expansion, expansion after people just calling the game pure shit, has cratered it substantially, obviously. People are not excited, people don't care. So, one decent expansion like Dragonflight is not gonna get people back in the chair. It's just not. You need more. This is what happens when you completely waste all of your goodwill, essentially. You need to you can't just have one success and have everyone come back and be amazed. You need multiple now.
Legion produced these numbers by itself, without a Season of Discovery, without a Classic. But still, I truly believe it is on an upswing. Basically, what they need to do is the hard work and just making stuff. Look, Dragonflight was a great version of World of Warcraft, the game mechanics, brilliant. The types of play, the reward schema, massive improvements. But it was not a great representation of what Warcraft, the franchise, Warcraft the emotion is, Warcraft the world, the setting. It's no wonder that they are leaning into more core Warcraft things with the War Within, and why they are setting both Midnight and the Last Titan in fan-favorite continents. So clearly, modern WoW, as a subset of World of Warcraft, has a long way to go, but I think is absolutely on the upswing. And now it's time to talk about some numbers. Okay, we cannot do exact ones here, but we can try. Our last official number is 5.5 million. That was a few quarters after they plummeted from the Warlords of Draenor launch spike of 10 million. And guess what? Based on what they did say in prior earnings calls, we can get a workable subscriber number.
Man, Warlords of Draenor was such a fucking failure, though. Man, you think you're going back to the Outlands, and instead of the Outlands, you get something that's completely new. Something you don't even know. Something that's just masquerading in the skin of the Outlands. That's just such a shit design decision in general, it's crazy.
Estimate for now that is basically as accurate as you can do. So, Warlords of Draenor's low was 5.5 million. When Legion launched, a misunderstanding with a journalist led to a number of 10.1 million subs being reported. Blizzard said that was false. They didn't provide a number though, but enter this, the Q1 2017 earnings report. So that's Q1 17, Legion released in Q3 the prior year, and this is what it says. Legion's overall performance is slightly ahead of the prior expansion. Now, this is obviously not perfect data, but, you know, 2 to 3 quarters post-launch, WoD was about 5.5 million, so what is their definition of slightly? If it's only 5%, then that would put Legion at a similar point in its cycle at 5.8 million subscribers. If we take this as a starting point, we can have a lot of fun. Okay, if we're at 5.8 million 2 quarters after Legion launched, then you just draw a horizontal line, you see that we hit about 5.8 million with the launch of Guardians of the Dream. But since then, it's hard to say because the y-axis isn't labeled, but if you are to assume that the y-axis starts at 0 and you count 5.8 million in pixels, you work out a subs per pixel value, and then you do the maths, then we get 7.
That's not necessarily how these graphs are made, by the way. These graphs can be made like this. Okay, wait, I'm gonna remove my face a little bit. There we go. Let me explain how these graphs can be made. This can easily be 0, but this can easily be, for example, 3 million. Then this can be 4 million, this can be 5 million, and then this can be like 5.1, 5.2, and things like that. The graphs, the y-axis does not need to be separated completely 100% from 0 to whatever. You know, in the same intervals. It doesn't need to be like that. There's absolutely no point in it being like that in a lot of cases, in fact. So, again, this can easily be 0, and this can easily be, for example, 4 million here. Because they want just this part to be more visible here, so it's easier to kind of understand for the specific period of time that they are talking about. So, you know, that's not necessarily true if they want to do it like that. Now, I have no idea how they're doing it. There is a good chance that all of these things are exactly the same. But, you know, just for your information that it can also be like that.
0.25 million subscribers right now, thereabouts. And
also, considering we have this graph here and he's giving us good start positions, we can actually also determine the damage of shadowlands right here. Because if you don't understand graphs, you're probably looking at this and saying, well, shadowlands didn't actually damage, you know, World of Warcraft that much now, did it? Because, you know, it's still above whatever, it's still above Battle for Azeroth and whatnot, right? Well, technically true. The dip is pretty much the same as Legions, so Shadowlands did not damage it, right? No, wrong. Because you need to take into account the fact that World of Warcraft Classic did come out at this point. And World of Warcraft Classic, while it does have a drop, it's still, you know, this is essentially what it keeps on doing here. It keeps the numbers stable about this position right here. Then Shadowlands comes out, and after Shadowlands, it's an absolute plummet. But you need to understand that the numbers of Shadowlands are supported by Classic World of Warcraft at this point. And, well, that's not good. Without Classic World of Warcraft, this graph dips even harder because, again, Classic is supporting the numbers of Shadowlands at this point because it came out. Which is insanely bad for Shadowlands. So without Classic, the dip of Shadowlands is ginormously bigger here. And again, something that further does give credence to this idea is the fact that Dragonflight came out and it didn't do anything. Because again, after Shadowlands completely gutted the story, gutted the everything, was fucking bad and boring in every case, people completely pretty much lost hope. And Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King? Well, I don't need to tell you that Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King were less popular than Classic. I mean, I played Burning Crusade and I gave up because it was just too hard to get attuned for specific stuff. Because if your tank was not online from the guild, good luck attuning for anything. You're literally sitting there in the trade chat for 5 hours trying to find a tank. That's insane. That was insane. So, yeah, these things didn't push up any numbers. So, considering these things did not push up anything, because retail players probably did not go just play Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King. They probably went to play Classic. So, considering these numbers are not pushing up anything, we can see the damage of the Shadowlands in the fact that so little people actually decided to take up the game at this point when Dragonflight released. And that's kind of crazy. But this also does show that Dragonflight has been a success. Dragonflight has been pretty good. Because, look at this. This number right here. This is 2017, right? It is a pretty noticeable drop from 18, and after Wrath of the Lich King comes out, here in a year's time, the numbers go pretty high down. But for World of Warcraft Dragonflight, the numbers haven't gone down that much. So, Dragonflight is objectively a success. But considering we need to account for the classic numbers for Shadowlands, people are looking at this and are thinking, well, Shadowlands did not actually do that bad. No, Shadowlands was a disaster, and this graph kind of just shows the effect of it. And it also shows that Dragonflight is a success. Crazy stuff.
And yes, this is a rough estimate, but guess what? We'll be able to prove that the y-axis actually does start at 0. So, while this is rough, I think you can see the fairly clear logic here, and at least it's a pretty damn good ballpark. But let's get a bit spicier. What were WoW's worst numbers? Well, 4.07 million, there and abouts, midway through BFA, and during Shadowlands, even with Classic helping, 4.5 million. One thing that actually does make me feel good about these numbers is the scale, though, because in the earnings call, again, covering Classic's release, Blizzard said it was the sharpest growth in history and that they essentially doubled their subscribers. And if you go back to the annotated chart, you can see from 4.07 million to 8.27 million, which basically is a doubling, so I'm very confident.
From the lowest point, yes, though. That is definitely a doubling. Okay. That I did not... From the lowest point, yes. That is a doubling, what we're talking about here. Okay. That is a doubling. Yeah. I was not talking about the lowest point here. So, yes, this is actually a doubling. Okay.
On that graph, yes. It's 0 on the y-axis. That is its starting point. And that I actually really do respect. A lot of companies will try to fudge with data by not labeling a y-axis or being a bit funny with it. That they really do seem to be just giving out the actual trends. That's honestly quite refreshing. So I suppose props to Holly and John. They evidently felt that actually they're in a strong enough feeling position that they can show this kind of thing.
No, that's completely false. Okay. If Blizzard sees his video and figures out that, wait a minute, he actually figured out the graph and it's accurate, the way that we're looking at it, that it starts from 0, those people are gonna get a fucking scolding, okay? Because you want to obfuscate in companies like this as much information as possible. Everything that can even be perceived in a slightly negative way needs to be obfuscated as much as possible. Blizzard is at no point here actually trying to be legit and coming forward with their real numbers. That is not their goal.
So that's the sub numbers, but there are other vital things, because for Blizzard, it's all about revenue per user. They use the store a lot more now than they used to. They pull future revenue forward using 6 and 12-month sub deals. But the thing is, WoW is probably over twice as expensive to develop. I mean, literally the headcount is like over, I think it's still over double what it was during Legion in like those earlier days, but our sub fees haven't risen. The expansion box prices went up, but not that much. So I think clearly the microtransactions like the cosmetics and the token, those are doing quite a bit of work. Because yes, ultimately the World of Warcraft team is, I think, just shy of 600 people. It really is quite massive, and that is far larger than it was at the past and say, you know, the likes of Wrath of the Lich King. Wrath of the Lich King, it had a team that would look tiny compared to the current one. And of course that's when they had 12.1 million subscribers. So that is basically it. I cannot wait for this talk to properly get out there so we can actually just break it down.
Well, it's interesting, that's for sure. So yeah, Dragonflight is a success. A pretty noticeable one, in fact. But Shadowlands is an absolute devastation. Well, anyway, that was Billiard Warcraft. Pretty good stuff. Yeah, okay. Nice, very interesting. I liked it. Anyway, this was because there's thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye bye.